Yes. Can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's fine now.
Okay. So before we get into the main stuff, before we learn about SQL, we're going to first learn about the basic things. So what is a database? We say database is an organized collection of data generally stored and accessed from a computer system. And like we have different types of data, like so in a computer system or in your mobile phone, you would have songs, you would have videos, you would have photos, you would have other documents, PDFs, documents. So all these are different types of data. And when you organize them in a particular way and store it, and that place is what we call as a database, where we store our data in an organized manner. And the purpose of the database is to make us available, like whatever the data that we have. So we have to organize it in a particular way so that we can easily search for it. And the purpose of the database is to host those organized data paths and make us convenient, like it will give us that convenience to access it easily. So here I've mentioned the Naukri as an example. So I hope everybody knows Naukri application, right?
Yes.
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 So what is the use of it? We're gonna use that application to
We are
apply for
gonna
most
find
jobs.
various.
Yes.
We are gonna find various job opportunities on Naukri.com. So
Yes.
that's the purpose.
Yeah.
It
So
collects the data.
why we are talking about that in regards to the databases. So when you are creating your profile, like when you're first time creating your profile, you're gonna mention your name, your education details, your previous job experience, and etc. And you're gonna also include your resume, right? So you're gonna upload your resume so that when you do apply to any other companies, they'll have an option to go through your resume. Now, when you have created your profile in Naukri and you have searched for some jobs and you have applied for one. Now, if you have applied for one particular job, then what happens when you click on apply? Whatever your data is, like your name, your details, and your resume, will be sent to that company. Like, for example, we have someone named Ayush is there. So that guy has created this profile and he has applied to a company. Now, when Ayush applies to a company, what happens? All Ayush's details that is there in the profile, including his resume, should have to be sent to that company. But if in other case, when Ayush clicks on the company and instead of Ayush's, there is someone else's resume is going there. That means there is not a organized collection of data is there on the backend part, on the database part. So when you apply for a company and others' resume is gone over there, so that is unorganized collection of data. An organized collection means whatever the data that yours is, whenever you do something, your data will be sent. There will not be any problems such as like this that will arise when we form an organized collection of data. So that is the example for organized and unorganized collection of data. And later on, we have these four fundamental parts of a database: create, read, update, and delete. Creating a database and reading it, updating it, and deleting. So for a business analyst, we're going to only have an option to read. So as I've said in the introduction part, like whatever the things that we have to do, whatever the data that is there that we have to extract from, we'll only have the access to that part when database administrator gives us. So when the DBA or the database administrator gives the access to us, it is only for reading purposes. We cannot change whatever that we are seeing. We can only view it. So that access is what we call as read. Creating, updating, and deleting are part of a database administrator. So we will not be doing any of that. as a business analyst. We'll only focus on read. And now coming to SQL. So SQL is structured query language, elaborately, and it is a programming language that is designed to facilitate retrieving specific information from the database. So we have these databases, this organized collection of data, and whatever data that is present inside it. In order to retrieve that data outside, we're going to use this SQL, structured query language. And SQL is for managing the relational databases. Now there are two types of databases that we have to have an idea of: database management system and relational database management system. So database management system and relationship database management system, let's find the difference between these two. So in the DBMS, our database management system, we store data as a file. Like in your mobile phone, you have this file explorers, right? So whatever you store in your mobile phone, it will be stored as a file or in a folder. Now that is a database management system. And on contrary to that, in the RDBMS or relationship database management system, whatever we store, it is stored in a tabular format, like in an Excel sheet, you see. So though we have all these different tables, and in that tables, they're going to store the data. And in DBMS, data is generally stored in either a hierarchical or a navigational form. So we can see, like when we are storing data, we can sort it from hierarchical, like A to Z or Z to A, or from time, or we have these different kinds of options to store the data. And in RDBMS, relationship database management system, the tables, whatever the tables are there, they have something called a primary key. There is this identifier called a primary key, and the data value are stored in form of tables. So what is this primary key, and all the other things we'll be learning as we move forward. And DBMS uses file systems to store data, so there will be no relation between two tables or between the tables, because in this DBMS, as we say, that it stores data as a file. So for example, in a folder you have two files, one is a video file and one is a photo file. Now there is no relation between these two, they are both very independent to each other. But in the RDBMS, each and every table is connected to other tables, so they are all related. So example for DBMS are file systems or XML, and example for RDBMS are MySQL, PostgreSQL, SQL servers, oracles, and etc. So as we're talking about SQL, we're gonna dive into more about the RDBMS, what is relationship database management system, and what are these tables that we have been discussing, and what do you mean by those primary keys, everything that we'll be discussing. So this is a table now. So in relationship database management system, as we've talked, we would have tables, and in that table, each row is called as a record. Okay. So each row is called as a record, and each column is called as a field. Now we have an example table here. So we have ID, we have name, we have state, and we have PIN. So this is a sample table, and here a more elaborative version. So we have three things here. So if we are creating a database for a retail shop, for example, so there is this retail shop, and for that we are creating a database. And in that database, there are three things. One is customer, one is item, and other is sales. So for the customer, what we're doing, we are creating an ID. Like for each and every customer who walks in, there will be different IDs, and the name of the customer, and the city he or she is from, and the state, and PIN. So this key symbol, if you're observing, So this is what we call as a primary key. So what is the use of this primary key means? First thing, it is given to any one of the column. Like we have ID, we have name, we have city, we have state and pin. So out of all this, why we have given only to the ID? Because if a column is having a primary key, that means it shouldn't have any of its values repetitively. So here you can see in this name, Smith is repeating, or the names might repeat. Like if we have, let's say, for a retail shop, daily 100 customers are coming, and out of those 100 customers, most of the times, few of the people's name will be the same. Let it be first name or a last name. So this name cannot have a primary key because it will have repetitive values. And the city also, they might be coming from the same city, or they might be coming from the same state. They might have the same pin number, but the ID that we are giving to each and every customer will be different no matter how many people enter. So this has each and every time a unique value. A same value is not repeated. So when we have these kind of columns, we're going to give that column a primary key. Hope you are getting this. Any doubt about the primary key, or you're not understanding?
Can you just repeat once again?
Yes. So in the relationship database management systems, we're going to store the data in the form of tables that you're seeing here. Now, this, whatever you see in the screen, is an example for a database created for a retail shop. You can take it as a Reliance Mart or a D-Mart, whatever it is. So for that, we have three tables we have created: customer, items, and sales. So in the customers part, we're gonna include all the customer details. So customer name, customer city, customer state, and PIN. And for each and every customer, we are giving a unique ID. Like when someone walks into the retail store, we're gonna give them an ID. And for every table, if you observe, for the customer table and for the item table and for the sales, you have this key somewhere on the table. So this key is what we call as the primary key. So what is this primary key? What is the use of this primary key is, as we've said, relationship database management has tables, and each and every table is linked to one another. So in order to have that relationship between those tables, this primary key will help us. It will help us to connect these other tables. And this key is given to one of those columns which doesn't have any kind of repetitive values in it. So in the name, some of the names might be repetitive, and in the city, some of the names might be repetitive, and in the state, some of the state might be repetitive, and so does the pin. But the ID part, where for each and every customer that enters in, we're going to give a different ID for every customer. So in this, there will not be any repetitive happening. So that is why we're going to give only the ID, the primary key. And after creating the customer ID, we're going to create a item table. So we have created a customer table, we kept that aside, and we have also created an item table. So we have camera, we have memory card, we have headphones, and their descriptions. So here also we are giving the primary key to the ID part, because all the name or the description might be somewhere around, it might come into a similar contact. So that is why we are giving this primary key to the item ID, because it will always be unique for each and every entry. So we have created a customer table and we have created a item table. And in the sales table, so for us to count the sales, so we need to identify which customer we are selling to and what item we are selling to, right? So we have given a sales ID, similar to how we have given ID to the customer, ID to the item, we have given ID to the sales. And then if you look at these two parts, item ID and customer ID. So where does this item ID has to be acquired from? How does the sales table know that we have some item ID and we have to get that item? So in this part, this item ID is there, it will be connected to this one. So that is what the relationship means. So this item ID will be connected to the sales part of here, and this customer ID will be connected to the sales part of the customer. So that is the meaning of the relationship databases. So they are connected to each other. So it might sound confusing a bit. And once we get into the database part and once we start doing things, once we start connecting those two, we'll be understanding what the primary key is and what is this relationship that we are talking about. So SQL has these 4 types of commands: DDL, which is data definition language; DQL, which is data query language; DML, which is data manipulation language; and DCL, which is data control language. So these are all the basic introductions that we need to know in order to get into the SQL part. And one more thing is, we can, like, SQL is a language that is used to take out the database. So in that we need a interface. So we need an IDE for typing those. So we can have that on MySQL, we can have that on Oracle, we can have that on Microsoft. So we have these different types of platforms where we can put our SQL code, create our databases, and retrieve data from. So today we are using Microsoft SQL Server Management System. So we also have Oracle or MySQL in the market. But today, as I'll be using the Microsoft SQL Server Management System, we'll be doing on that. So when you open Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio or SSMS, you'll have this pop-up. So this server is built in inside the studio. So you don't have to change anything. You can see it is a desktop name, some desktop, whatever desktop you use, that name will be coming in and it will give SQL Express. So this server is automatically assigned to this studio. So you can just say connect. Now it is done. So we have this blank space here, we have nothing. So if you want to write your SQL queries, you can see here you have a new query option. You can click on it and new page will pop up on this side. Right. So in SQL we have, you can see we have this part, the databases, security, server objects, replication, polybase. So these are all the things that are already given. So you don't have to change anything. Let me just delete the previous versions. Now, if you look at this, we have something called master. So all these things, this master, model, MSDB, and tempdb. So these are all the databases that are given with the system. So you don't have to do any kind of changes to those. The salesDB is something that I have previously worked on. So that is why it is showing here. And whatever databases that you create, that will be showing here as well. And let's try to create a database. So let's try to work on from the basics. So as we have said, we have 4 fundamental things in databases: create, read, update, and delete. So first we're gonna create. So we're gonna understand how normally a database creation happens. And one thing we need to keep in mind is SQL is not a case sensitive language. So what do you mean by case sensitive means? Like when if you have a knowledge of any other programming language, so there are some languages which are case sensitive, which means you can see hi and so these two are different meanings if you talk about a case sensitive language. But when we say that it is not a case sensitive language, it doesn't matter how, in which way you write. So it is the same. So you don't have to worry about capital letters or small letters while you're writing. So this is not a case sensitive language. So that we need to keep in mind. And one thing is, so these two lines here, what I've did here is this is what we call as comment. So commenting is what we use in programming language to describe the code that we have written. Let's say that we have written some kind of code here. So in order to describe what that code does, we're going to create a line which describes what that code is, and it will not be considered as a code because we are just giving these two lines in order to indicate that this is not a code. You don't need to run it for the system. So this will not run. And yeah, so let's try to create a database. It is very easy. Just type in create database, and yeah, so we're going to work on this one. And you can just click on this execute button. You can see commands completed successful. So if you want to see whether your database has been created or not, you can go to this part, databases, and if it is not showing, you can just click on this one, refresh. So you'll have this school database created. Very simple. And you can also create databases in this part also, like you can give the underscores, you can type in any kind of name. And so one thing you need to keep in mind is, like when you have this code, like initially you have created the database school, it is created, and you want to create another database called school b2. Now if you directly click on the execute button, it will give us an error because it will try to execute from the start to an end. And first it will go to this line and it will give us an error because this database is already been created. So in the SQL, if you do not want that kind of errors to pop up, so what you're going to do is you're going to select what you want to execute, then you can click it. Okay, now command successfully. Just try to refresh and go to databases. So you have two databases that you've created. Very easy. And later on we have seen creation. Now let's try to delete or drop these databases. Now let's say that out of these two we don't need two databases, we only need one. So in that case, what we can do, we can say drop database. So this system is already giving us the options, which one do you want to choose. And while you're working with some kind of SQL, while you get into a business analyst role and you're using these commands, be very careful while using the drop command, because when you want to delete a database, it will not ask you, like it will not give you a pop-up whether you want to delete it or not. The moment you execute this code, the database will be deleted. So you're going to select it, you're going to execute, complete, refresh, so it is gone. So we have dropped the database, we're done. And till now it is clear. Any doubts?
Hi.
Hi.
So drop and delete is same.
No, we have entirely three things. I'll show you. There is drop, there is delete, and there is another thing called truncate. So these three are used in order to delete something in the SQL. and this delete is used to delete the rows of a table. Like as I've said, we're going to create tables to store the data, and in order to delete rows of those tables, we're going to use delete. And in order to in order to delete a particular row, like we're having a big table, and in order to delete one or two particular rows, we're going to use delete. And in order to delete the entire row set, total rows in a table, we're going to use truncate. And for all the other options, we're going to use drop.
Drop. Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
So these three functions are used.
Okay. I have a quick question.
Yes.
So in the left menu, we have the database tab, right?
Yes.
So from there also, we click the right click, so we can create and we can delete that database, right? So does it make any difference if you write a command, or you can create from there also, right? If you click a right click there in the
Yes.
database,
We can create databases. We can create delete databases using the system as well without writing a single line of code. But that is not what we'll be doing, right? So we will be, as a business analyst, we'll be just retrieving data. Like what is the data that is already there? We will be trying to retrieve that data, look into the data, and try to formulate something out of it. So we're learning about creating and deleting and all the other stuff, because to have a general SQL idea. So if we just go through by the Microsoft System Service options, then we will not have that much of an SQL idea. If we go to the coding, if you want to create, you can just right click on this and you can just easily create a new database. That is as simple as that. So, but for us to have the knowledge of these queries, so in order to, what is the query that you would use in order to retrieve some data out of a database? So all those different queries that you need to have an idea of when you want to, when you get into the database part, when you become a business analyst. So we're gonna get into that as well. We're gonna get into how to create tables and how to insert data into the tables using the system and using the code. We're gonna learn both these options. Okay. So here we have created a database and we have already dropped one. And now let's try to create a table. So in the RDBMS, in the relationship database management system, we're going to create tables, and all that tables will be storing the data. So for that, you can just write create, and you're going to write table, and yeah. So one more thing you need to do before creating a table is you need to make sure that whatever table that you're creating, it is under the database that you've initially created. Like you have created the school database, right? So now you are creating a table inside that school database, and you have to make sure that you are creating that table over there. Now if you look at here, it is showing master because currently we're working there. It is not specified that we are creating this table in the school database. In order to specify it, you can use this use option, use school. Then you don't have to worry about what is there in here. So if you do not use this one, and if you actually create a table, then you will get an error because you can't create anything on the master. So use school, and sometimes in some softwares for SQL coding software, some use colon and some use not. It is not much of a difference. So we have use school inside the use school database. We are creating a table, and let's name it students. Okay. And what are the things, like for a student has to be there in a school? So we first gonna give him an ID. Like every student will have their own ID, right? ID identifying number, and these identifying number, as we've seen, this will be unique for each and every student that enrolls or that is there inside the school. Will have a very unique number that will not be repeated between two people. And first off, we're gonna write the column name. What is a column that we're going to create, which is the ID. and later on we're going to write a data type. So program people would have a small knowledge on would have a knowledge on this data types. Like for the ID, we are mostly going to have numbers for it. So that is why we're going to go for int. So integer data type, ID int, and later on we're going to mention as primary key, because this ID, as we've talked, it is a unique number which will not be repeatable by any two people. So we're going to give this that primary key, not null. And this ID column should not have any null values. The ID column should not be left alone. So it has to have any kind of value. ID.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, can we put multiple conditions here, like integer or alphabet? Like suppose we are creating a KRN number for a student, so that will be include a number and alphabet. So
Yes,
can
we
you
can
put
do that. So we have data types for that as well. If we have a combination of number and letters, for example, if you're trying to come up with a core score, for example, for a computer science branch, we would have something like CS001 or some CS005. So these are combination of letters and numbers. So for that also we would have data types that we'll get into it slowly as we write the code for it. Okay. So we have ID, we have the data type integer, we have the primary key, and it is mentioning that it is not null. And the last one is identity. So what is this identity? Means like whenever we enter something, like for the school we have, let's say, one by one people are entering, and when we type in the student details and when we enter, for the next one it should increment, like okay, the first student is given the ID 1. So later on when we click on enter and when we try to enter another student detail, it should increment that ID number to 2, and later on it should increment the ID number to 3. So like that, no matter how many entries we give, the ID should be incremented. So this identity will take care of that. So this identity 1 comma 1 means whatever details that we enter, it will start with ID number 1 and it will increment one by one as we enter the detail. Now if you click on 10 here, that means the ID will start with the number 10, and as we enter the details, it will increment one by one, 11, 12, 13, like that. So that is the identity. And after completing the ID, we're going to enter the student first name, and for this you can use, yeah, so this one is the data type that we have talked about, where we can use the names and numbers as a combination, which is n varchar. And here I'm giving the condition as 50 because this is a condition, like the first name shouldn't exceed more than 50 characters, and we're also keeping it as not null, so we would not want to have a null first name. And similarly, in varchar 50 again, not null. And later on let's try to have date of birth, and this is a date time data type. So as we have integer for numbers and we have n varchar for number and name combinations, and for the date of births or any kind of date date inclusions and time inclusions, we're going to use the date time data type. And this is also not null. And the last is student enrollment date, or you can say enroll date. This is also date. So I'm not giving a not null option, so it can be null, so I'm just leaving it like that. So this is the detail, like these are all the columns that we have created in the table for students. So in the school database, we have created a table called students, and inside that table of students, we have this ID, first name, last name, date of birth, and enroll date as a columns. Now, if you want to execute it, as I've said, you can just select and click on execute. The command completed successfully. And if you want to view whether how this table looks like. So there is this command to view the data, which is select, and you can click on star from students. Now this is the syntax for viewing a particular table. Execute. You can see ID, first name, last name, date of birth, and enrolled date. So still we haven't entered any kind of details inside it, but we have just created a table for now. And as we have created table for students, we can also create table for courses as well. So when we have a school, we have students, we would also have courses, and that is create courses. So for that, I just had a note prepared for it so that we don't have to waste much of our time. Right. So we have created the table courses wherein we have given course ID and integer as a data type and same primary key and identifier. And when we give the primary key to a column, so then this not null option we can leave it, because primary key indicates that that particular column should not have any null functionality. Even though you keep not null or not for the primary key, it is the same. And we have given the identity to increment the value whenever we give it. And later we have title. So for a course, we have a course title, and we have nvarchar 50 again, and number of credits. Now for every subject there will be credits, and some for some subjects we will not have some credits. So that is why I've left it that it can have a null option. I've not given a not null. And later on we have course code. So course code, most of the time it will be of 5 letters, and it would be a combination of letters and numbers. So we have nvarchar 5. So this is the example for it. This is a comment, right? So we can just select this one and execute. This is created. And if you want to see here whether the tables are created or not, you can just go to the database part. You can just go to the school, which is the database that you're working, and in this you can go to the tables. See, you have students and courses table created for you. Now this is an easy part. So how to create table using the SQL code. You can also create tables by the system as well. You can just go here, right click on it and click on a new table. You can just create all those. Now as we have created these tables like the course and students, let's try to insert data into it. So we have students and courses, and for the students let's try to insert the data, which is insert into students, and you can just type in like what are the things here. For the student part, we have, you can go to the columns. You can see we have ID, first name, last name, date of birth, and enrolled. So you don't have to give anything for the ID because ID will automatically increment itself. So we are not considering ID while giving these insertions. And we have first name, we have last name, we have date of birth, and enrolled. So while we are inserting the data, so it has to follow this order only. So first thing, we should have the, you can just drag and drop this one, or you can just directly write it. So first name, if you write, it will come out. Last name, it will come out. Or else the other way to do this is just drag and drop this one. It will come out like this. And you can again drag and drop the enrollment date. It is done. Right? So we have insert into students, first name, last name, date of birth, and enrolled date. So for this, what are the values that we need to insert? That we're going to do here. So we're going to first include the first name, we're going to include the last name, we're going to include the date of birth, and we're going to include the enrolled date. So you can see first name, last name, and date of birth should not have any kind of null functionality, so we have to mandatorily fill in the details. But the enroll date part, it can have null, so we can leave it. It is not a problem. So first, let's try to put in a first name. So can anybody give me a first name and last name? Sorry. Ashutosh, you said?
No, sir, it's Abhinav. Abhinav.
So Abhinav, you said?
Yes.
Okay. ABHINAV, Abhinav is the first name, and later on we can have. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we have first name and last name, so we can have date of birth. And for the date of birth, as we have seen, we have used date time variable. Sorry, date time, the data type. So for the date time data type, the format to write the date time is year, month, and date. Year, month, and date. So in this format, you need to write in the databases, and let's write a random date of birth. So let's go for 1998, 10, and 5. Okay. Now this is the date of birth. And enrollment date, you can keep it, you can just give it, let's say 2020 and 8, 13. Like this is 1, and you can, like if you have only one value to enter, you can just complete here, or if you have a bunch of values, you can go here and you can go on. And so I have these ones set up as well, so let's try to pull up those. So we have a couple of names here, a couple of values. So first name, last name, date of birth, and null. So I have given some of the enrollments as null. So let's try to select this and execute. The 5 rows are affected in the students table. Now let's try to see what happened to the student table, which is what is the command to bring out the data or look into the data we have just used.
Select star.
Yes. Select
Or
from the table
boom.
name. From the table name.
Okay.
We can select it and execute. So you can see ID is given 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 automatically updated, and we have the first name, we have the last name, and we have the date of birth, and we have the enrollment date, right? So this is for the students. And for the courses, let's try to include the data from the system part. So you can go here. Here we have edit top 200 rows. Just click on it. So you have this option. So you shouldn't, there is no need for anything to enter into the course ID, because we have given it as a primary key and identifier, so it will automatically update itself. And let's try to give some of the courses names. So let's say we have SQL as one course, and number of credits, let's say 3, and course code SQ001. And another is, let's say, Tableau is there. So Tableau is one course, and number of credits, let's say null. So we have given number of credits as null, and course code TA002. And Python is there, and course credits 5, let's say PY003. And we have JavaScript, let's say 4, The last one is Google's Go language, and let's keep it as null. We have entered all these. You can just click on you just delete this one, and now if you want to see whether that worked or not, you can again do the same thing. You can click on select from courses and select this one, execute. See, we have course ID, we have title, and we have the number of credits, and we have the course. So we have successfully created two tables in the database, the school database, and we have inserted the data into it. And the main part that we're talking about is the relationship between the tables. So where is it? So let's try to create one more table to have more efficient view. We have courses, we have students, and let's try to create another table. You can go here, you can just right click on it, click on a new table, click here, and let's try to create a table for teachers. So let's have a couple of teachers here, and first we'll have an ID automatically, and for the ID the data type is int, and we should not allow any lubs. And so always we give the ID the primary key. Now if you are entering the values or entering the columns in the table using this format, how do you give a primary key? So for that you can go to this arrow or right click on it, set primary key, and it is done. And normally what we do, so if you see here, we have for ID we give the integer data type we have given, and the primary key we have given, and the identity. So where do we give the identity here? So you can just drag this one up. If you go down, you have this identity specification. Double click and click on the is identity. So it will avail the identity 1 dash 1. It will avail the increment. So with that, the ID is over. Then we'll have teacher's first name is nvarchar, and teacher's last name, and date of join. So you can have date or date time. So we have created a table, first name, last name, and date of join. So you can just click on Control S, and you can rename it teacher or teachers, and it is saved. You can just remove it, and if you refresh this one again, you will have three tables here: courses, students, and teachers. So till now we haven't entered anything in the teachers part. So we have created courses and students, we have created or we have inserted all the details into those two, but we haven't done anything to the teachers. So let's try to give that as well using the system, wherein we're going to go to the edit top 200 again, and we're gonna give a random first name to the teacher. So any random first name. Who's gonna be the teacher here? Can you give me your name?
Tejasvi.
Okay. Tejasvi. Last name?
BONTHU.
Okay. And then let's try to have a random date of join. So okay. And any other?
Akshay Darade.
Okay. Akshay Darade. So let's try to keep it null. And next we have, I'll just pick the names up so that it will be easy. So I have someone named this, right? And we have the last one is so I think these are enough. So we have 4 teachers. You can just save or you can just remove, and you can again do the same thing. You can remove this one and try to hit teacher, execute. So you have teacher's first name, last name, and date of birth. So we have these 3 tables. We have courses and we have you can select all these 3 to view, execute. You can view them like this. We have the students, the courses, and the teachers, and the relationships part. So how are we going to relate? Like in the previous presentation you have seen, we have a different table for the customer, we had a different table for the items, and whatever the customer id and item id are there that were present in the sales table. So how did that happen? So that we're going to do. So we're going to create another table which going to facilitate all the relationships. So if you're going to try to facilitate the relationships between these 3, it will be a bit messy. So to have a clear understanding of clear description, to view the data more clearer way, we're going to create another table in which we're going to facilitate all the relationships. So let's try to see or create table, let's say enrollments. So random name, create table enrollment. So instead of giving the name here, I think it will be easy. We can go here. You can just go to the tables part. You can go here, create table. In this, you can give an ID for it. An ID we would obviously have a primary key. Just click on a primary key. You can just give it int, and you have to log these also. You shouldn't forget identity specification. And after giving this, so when we talk about relations, so in here we're gonna connect all those 3 different things, 3 different tables: courses, teachers, and students. Now how are we gonna do that? First off, we'll create some column names here. Let's say student ID is there, and that will also be an int. And we're gonna have course ID, that will also be an int. And at last we'll have teacher ID, that will also be an int. So we have student ID, course ID, teacher ID. So let's save it first. Enrollments. So we've done it. And how are we going to give the relation means? So if you go to the student ID, right click on this, you're going to find something called relationship. You can just click on this one and you'll have this dialog box popping up. You can just click on add and you'll have this one. You can go to the table and column specification section. So for that, what is a primary key table? You can go to the students part and select the what is a primary key which you want to attach to ID. So in the table that we're going to attach to the enrollments part, so first off we're going to take the student table, and in that student table what is the primary key that we have given is the ID, and that we are attaching it to the student ID of the enrollment table. We can click on OK, and that is done. So we have connected the student ID to the student table, and we're going to do the same to the courses. We're going to go there, we're going to click on the courses part, we're going to click on the course ID, and we're going to connect that to the course ID of the enrollment, and we're done. And the last one is the teachers. We're going to go there, we're going to go to the teacher part, we're going to show the ID, and we're going to connect that to the teacher's ID of the enrollment. Okay, so right now we have connected all these parts. So we've connected the student ID of the enrollments to this table, and we have connected the course ID of this enrollments to the ID in the courses table, and we have connected the teacher ID of the enrollments to the ID in the teachers table. So if we try to save this one, you can have this option. The following tables will be saved. You can just click on S and you can remove this. Now, if you want to see what happened to the enrollment table, select execute. So we have just created the IDs and the columns, and we have given the relationship. So till now we haven't called any kind of relationship. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to this enrollments table again, and we're going to edit. So we have a students part. How many students do we have? Let's try to view it. Edit, and let's try to view the teachers, and let's try to view the courses. So we have 5 courses and their titles, and we have 4 teachers, 5 courses, 4 teachers, and 5 students. Now in this, let's try to give a student ID. So student IDs are here. So we're just giving the student IDs. We are not mentioning everything, because when we click on the student ID, when we mention the student ID over there, this enrollments, as it is linked to the student ID part, student table, it will grasp the information. So let's say 2 is the student ID, and course that he'll be taking or she'll be taking is 1, and the teacher will be number 3. So here, what does it mean? 2 is the student ID, which is here, and course ID, which is SQL, and later on we have teacher ID, which is number 3. So like that, if you have a bunch of values here, so for example, so all this data normally, like here we are creating or we are entering all this. So when we create any kind of backend database, when we create all these tables, most of it will be empty, because all this will be filled automatically when someone enters. Like when a new registration comes in for the school, they're going to enter his details in the system. So when we click on save, all this will be already saved in the database. Now if you try to take out the database, so all this will be connected, and we're going to use this select keywords or select queries in order to retrieve the database into the display. So let's try to give some random numbers here. Student ID 3 is here, and his course code is also 1, and his teacher is also 3, and student ID 1 is there, and the course code is 4, for example, and the teacher ID is 1. So we have these small numbers, and we can just remove all. Now if you try to do the same thing, you'll see all this 1 2 3 is happening. So but we wouldn't understand. So what we're going to do is, we have something called join. So what are these joins? So joins will help us to retrieve the data or show the data in a convenient manner. So now I'll show, there are different types of joins. There is join, inner join, left and out joins. So there are different commands that you can use in the joins part. And before getting into the joins, I'll just show you how to view the different data parts. Like as we have said, these are all connected. So how to view that connections? What is the meaning of this connection and how it will be helpful? So I'll just show you. So here you can see select from enrollments. So here we are using a join, which is called inner join. So what we're doing is select from the enrollments, which is we have to show everything that the enrollment table has to show. And after showing the enrollments table, we will be connecting or joining the teachers table to it. Teachers on teacher ID or teacher dot ID. So what does this mean? So this means we are selecting this enrollments, like we want to see the enrollments part, and with that enrollments part we also want to join the teacher's information, which is present or which is equal to the teacher ID. So if we try to execute this one, so you can see we have until this point we have this enrollment part, and here you can see that the teacher ID is the 3312, and what is the name of that teacher that is given here. And so that is only for the teachers part. So if you want to try to take out other information, so inner join, let's say student is there. Students on students dot id is equals to enrollments dot student ID. And similarly you can go for courses dot. So we have the enrollment table will be first showing up until this point. Then we're going to have teachers table, like you can see the teacher number 3312. What is the teacher details until then joining date. Then we're going to have the student table. So what are the students that are present in here? 2314. So what is the ID of that student and what are the details of that student we can see. And the last one is course. So what are the courses that are involved? 1143. So what is that 1143 we can see. So like that you can use this inner joins in order to take out all the information or view or read the information. So this is mostly the part that we'll be doing as a business analyst. So till now, what is the point that we've learned? We have learned creating of the databases, creating of the tables, and inserting data into the tables using the code and using the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio software. And after creating the tables and after inserting the data, then we've also seen how to connect, like in the relationship databases, how to connect the relationship between all the other tables that we have seen. And after that, how do we recall the data out? So as a business analyst, this is the main part that we'll be doing. So we'll be recalling the data out. So for that, we need to understand what these joins are and how to use those joins. So we have inner join, left, right joins, and this select statement. So we need to understand how to use the select statement. And for example, there are other ways to use the select statement as well. So let's say we're trying to execute only the students part. Now we have this one. So we have opened the students. Now, if you want only the first name and last name of the students, for that you can just remove the star. So select first name comma, last name from student. Now, if you try to do this, and if you want to select this one, so you just have the first name and last name of the student. So like that, you can use the select option. So if you have so much information that you have in the table and you need to have a particular column that you want to see, so then you can use this one. So these are all the different ways to call out the data, and these are the basics. Any doubts? Anything or that you didn't understand?
Sir, could you please explain this enrollment thing?
Sorry,
Just an overview.
about the enrollments part.
Enrollment. Yes.
Yeah. So this enrollments, we have created this table. Yes.
Okay.
So we have created this enrollments table like to have all this relationship. Like we have student, we have courses, we have teacher. So in order to have all this different data, and we need, if you want to view all this different data in a combined format, so we need to have that relationship placed in a particular way. Like for example, if anyone is familiar with the programming language, any programming language, if you want to add two parts, if you want to add 1 and 2, so what you're going to do, you're going to attach a variable to one number, and you're going to attach a variable to another number. And when you want to get out the, when you want to have the output, and that output will also have a variable to host that output, right? So similarly,
Okay.
the relationship, whatever relationship that we are connecting the students, course, and teachers, so this relationship has to be hosted by another table. So that is the enrollments part that we have created. So in this enrollment parts, we have connected the students, courses, and teachers, and we have given all the details, like what are the student IDs are there, and what courses they are enrolled in, and who is the teacher of that course. So for that reason, we have created the enrollments. Got it?
Yes.
Yeah, guys. Any more doubts?
Venkat sir, can you please repeat it from the beginning?
Which one?
Just the overview
Oh,
of creating a table.
sure. So this entire part, you can see SQL as a case sensitive language. From the starting, you can give random names. You can just write it as this one, and later on you can write it like this. Anything goes. So you can create a database by this, and you can drop the database or delete the database by using this drop function, drop database, and make sure you are using it in a perfect way and in an authorized way. Because if you're dropping or deleting a database, it might contain a valuable information. So whenever you're trying to drop something, make sure that it is under the provision of a database administrator. And later on, if you want to create a table, so first you have to make sure that whatever database that you have created in that database only you're creating the table. So if you're using the Microsoft one that like I'm using, you can go here, you'll have all these options. Just try to select which database you're working on. That will be good. But if you don't want to get bothered, like whatever that is there in this, you can just directly use this command, use school. So use space, whatever the database that you're working on. So after that, you can create your table. So create table, you can give the table name, and inside that, you're going to write the column names of the table, like the ID, the first name, the last name, the date of birth, and enrollment date that you've given. And the ID, the first ID, we all know that it will not have any kind of repetitive values. Everything will be unique. So that is why we have given a primary key to it, and we have also given the identity, which means the incrementation. So as we enter the values, the ID will get increment. And the first name, so it has this inverse data type and not null. So we are not telling that it should have a null value. It should have any kind of value. Similar for the last name and date of birth. So date of birth has date, time, and enrollment date. So all these are the columns for the students table. And similarly, we've also created the courses table. So the courses table has course ID and title, number of credits, and course code. So with that, we have created the tables, and if you want to look at those tables, if they are working fine or not, you can just select star from the table name, and you can view ID, first name, last name. And in order to insert the data inside the table, you can use this one, insert into students, and you need to specify all the column names except for the ID, because you don't have to give anything for the ID, it will automatically increment itself. So except for the ID, write in all the column names, and whatever the value that you're giving, it has to be aligned in this format on. Like if you're giving the first name and last name, you have to mention this is the first name and last name. If you are writing this is as a last name, then this one should come here. And for the date time, this is the format that you write in any kind of dates. And once you're done giving the data, you can just select this one and execute it in order to have the data inside the table. So like that, you can have multiple tables created, and you can enter multiple data sets inside those tables, and you can check here. Okay. And later on, in order to have that relationship, we have created the enrollments table. You can go to here and you can see enrollment table is there. And for that enrollment table, we have connected all these different like students, courses, teachers. We have given a primary key for each and every table, and we have connected all those primary keys to this table. So we have connected this to this table in order to have that relation between all those. So we have connected the student table here, student ID primary key here. We have connected the course ID, and we have connected the teacher. So, and we have given the numbers as well. So by that, we can see the connection from all the three tables into enrollments, and by that we can use this join examples or join functions in order to call out that table. So you can just select this one again, and you can see we have the enrollments table that we have initially mentioned. And for that, if you're using inner join, what it gives is, it gives us the enrollments table, and attaching to it, it's going to give the teacher ID that we have mentioned. So whatever the ID that we have connected, so that will be coming up here, the teacher's details and the student details and the courses details. So these are the basics. And if you want to have more knowledge, if you want to go deep into that, there are some very useful sites, because this one is a very useful site. W3 Schools is one thing, and you have another thing called Java Point. So these two websites are very resourceful when it comes to programming language learning. You can visit these on Google, but if you want to get more into SQL, so these are very good starting points.
Venkat sir, I have one question. Is it always INT and NVACHAR?
No, see, this INT is used for integer data, like when the data that you're supposed to enter in this column is only numbers, then you can go for INT. If you go to this table, for example, if you go to the students table, edit 200 rows, you can see, where is it? There will be something called modify option here. See, so here we have INT. So we have so many things here. See, varchar max, small int, time, unique identifier, varchar max. So based on the input that you're giving into that column, the data type will be based on that. So in the ID, we will only give numbers. So that is why we have given int. So if you're going something like 1.2, 1.3, then we're going to give float. So if you are just giving a character or just alphabets, so you can go for char. Or if you are giving any kind of number and alphabet communication, then you're going to give NVART. So like this, and you can see for the date of birth and enrollment date, you have given date time, or there is another thing called date. So like this, whatever the data that you're entering into the column, based on that, you're going to give the data type. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Any more doubts, guys?
I have one question.
Yes.
So, as a business analyst, do we have to create this this programming language along with this relationship? We have that job, or we just have to analyze the data what we have been given by the SQL developer?
Yeah, so we will not be creating any of this. So I've just explained all this to have a knowledge, like creating the databases, creating the tables, and giving the relationships. So these are all done by the database. You don't have to worry about it. The main thing that you need to focus on is these select commands. Like, let's say the database admin has created all the required data, and you wanna have a look into it. So yeah, I'll tell the primary key and unique key. I'll get into it. So yeah, coming to this point, when the database admin has created a particular database and you wanna see something like here's database admin has created a sales database, and inside that you need to look into the customers part. Like in the sales database, you need to you have a customers, you'll have items, and you'll have sales. Now, if you want to look into the customers part particularly, then you're going to have to use this command, select from the customers table. So for that, you need to have an idea like how to use the command, what are the command that you need to use in order to retrieve that particular table. And inside the customers, you might have different options like first name, last name, city, PIN number, the address, all this stuff. So you wouldn't want all this stuff. You just want the first name and last name. Then you're going to remove the star and then you're going to type in the column ID. So you want first name and last name. So like that, you can use the select option and the select and the join. So you can see the combination view here. You have to work on joins. We have only talked about inner join here. There is left and right joins also. So once you're done with this, you can just go through those websites just to have a quick idea of what they are. And these are the main things that you need to have an idea of as a business analyst. And all the creating of the database part, deleting, updating, so all this you don't need to worry about. And coming to the primary and unique key, they are both the same. Like if you're coming here, identity, like any column, let's not identity, it is the first name, last name, or date of birth. So for which column we're going to give this primary key is the column which has any all the unique keys. So if a column has to have a primary key, that means it must satisfy the condition that it should not have any kind of repetitive or null values. So that column will be given a primary key option. That means each and every value in that column should be unique. So for that, see the first name, last name, date of birth, and enrollment, they might be same, like one person to another person, they might be same at some extent. But the ID will always be changing no matter how many people come in. So, and there will not be any kind of null values. If someone gets out, or if someone's graduate or a new thing comes, so they're gonna just remove that number and they're gonna continue with it. They will not just leave it as null. So this ID doesn't have any kind of null values, and this will be unique. There will be a unique number for each and every entry. So that is why this ID is qualifiable to have a primary key. I hope that solves your question.
Hello. Yeah.
Yes.
So regarding this primary key and unique key only. So as we know that the primary key cannot be a null value, but however unique key can be a null value also. So how the both will satisfy condition in one column?
However, what?
However, unique key can be a null value also.
No, I'm not here. There is no such thing as unique key. Here we're talking about unique value. So we would have primary key and foreign keys. Two keys will be there. So primary key is given to a particular column in which the column has each and every unique key. So for example, if you see this one, I'll just show you right away. So we have this students part. We will execute it. So in the student part, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 IDs are there. There is no such repetitive happening. So if I just rename this one to Abhinav Kumar again. So it will not give any kind of error because that is possible. But if you try to change this one, you cannot do that. Like if I try to delete this Akshay Kumar name here, so what happens? It will remove the 2 number and it will start from 1345, but it will not have a null value and it will not have a 0 value. So this ID is a unique column in which it has no repetitive of a similar numbers, and each and every number is unique inside it. There will not be any repetition. So that is why this ID will have an option or will have the access to have the primary key. And when we talk about foreign key, so there is another thing called foreign key. Foreign key means like we have did. So in the enrollment part, what we have did, we have connected the other keys. So we have connected the other primary keys into the enrollment part, right? So we have connected the student ID to the enrollment, and we have connected the course ID to the enrollment. We have connected the teacher ID to the enrollment. So all these are primary keys for their tables, but they are connected to another enrollment table. And for this enrollment table, they're going to become the foreign because they are coming from another table. Got this?
Hello.
Yes.
These creating primary key is this the job of business analyst, or it's a system admin will do that?
Guys, you don't have to create anything. So you will be just viewing. A work of a business analyst regarding the SQL is just reading. Reading.
Okay.
Analyze the data.
Yeah, reading and
These
analyzing.
enrollment part, who will do this business analyst, right?
No, everything relationships and everything will be done. So this part you will be doing. So this part is done for viewing. So here all the data is already being created by the database admin. The students, courses, teacher, enrollments, all these are created by the database admin. So your part is if you need any kind of data that you want to see, that you want to take some results out with. So you're going to directly use the select commands to view what the data currently has. And if you want to view a bunch of different data in one time, so then you're going to use this inner joins or directly use all the select options. So you will not be creating or you will not be deleting anything. You will just be reading the data. You will not have access to doing any kind of changes.
So how can we know that which is primary key in that case?
Yeah, so that is why we have seen all this, right? So if you look into this, let's say that we have this select from students. So we can see that ID is not repeated. No, or else if you want to go to the tables part here, you can see go to the edit top 200 rows. So in that, most of the time the IDs will be given. Most of the time the IDs will be given the primary key, or else if you just look into the code, you will see that it is a primary key. You can easily identify what is a primary key by just looking at the table. So out of which one has a repetitive process, then you can remove that. Which one has a unique value for each and every entry, that will be the primary.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So Bhavna, you were saying something?
Yeah, no, my doubt is clear. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, guys. Any more doubts? Any more things that you didn't understand regarding whatever we have done here? Okay.
Sir, example for foreign key.
So the foreign key part, same thing happens here. So we have this customer ID, like in this customer table, we have given this as a primary key, and same for the item. Now in the enrollments part, what we have did, we have connected the students part, right? So if you go to the enrollments, so if you go to the enrollments, we have this, or if you go here, let's say design is there. So we have connected the student ID to the ID of the students. So whatever the ID it is there. So here for the students part, the ID is the primary key, and we have connected that primary key to the student ID of the enrollment. Now that this student ID will become foreign key to the enrollments part. Understood? So for in the students table, we have this ID which is the primary key for the students table, and that primary key we have connected to the enrollments part of the student ID. Now this student ID here, this will become the foreign key for the student ID here. Got it? So if we connect other primary keys inside another table, so those primary keys will become foreign keys for this table. Any more doubts, guys? Everybody's clear?
Can you please explain join once again? Inner join?
Sure. So inner join. So why we use inner join means if you just go through the select of the enrollments, you'll just see these. And if you want to see who is the student, who is the core, what is the course ID, and what is the teacher, who is the teaching it. So if you want to do that, you can just first write down the enrollments or select enrollments, and for that you're going to attach the inner join. So if you want to know about just the teacher, so who is the teacher for this? So if you can write this one. So inner join, show me the teacher on the condition of teacher ID is equals to enrollments of the teacher. So we have connected the same thing. The ID, which is the primary key of the teacher, we have connected it to the teacher ID of the enrollments. So when these two are equal, then you have to join the teacher's part for the enrollment. So that is the condition. Now if we try to execute this one, it is first showing the select enrollments, the enrollments table is there, and later on, as this condition is true, this is the condition, teacher ID is equals to enrollments in the teacher ID. So inside the teacher table, we have ID as a primary key, and we have connected it as a relationship to the enrollments table for the teacher ID table. So if this condition is true, connect to the teacher part for the enrollments table. So that is what happened. So here we have the enrollments table, and later on we have the teachers table. Similarly,
And if we want only particular records out of teachers table, then?
yeah, if you want to have just particular records of a teacher table, so then teachers table you're talking about, or you're talking about the enrollments?
In the enrollment table, say I want only 2 records from the teachers table by joining the
Okay, so
teacher and enrollment table.
from the enrollments, you would not want all 4, you will want just 2. That you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay. So select from enrollments, inner join, and you can have this where condition, where you can say this enrollments dot id is equals to 1. Is this the correct one? try if this works out. So I don't think it's working out currently. So I think that may not be possible, but instead we can directly take out the columns separately. So if you want to see the first name and last name, we can have that. But if you want to search for only a few things, like let's say like we have only four, like when you currently go to a school or a college, so we would have thousands of data that are included. Now if you want to separately look into that, you can go for here and you can just go through the edit top 200. So in this option it will be very easy, or else if it is not edit, edit top 200 or select top 1000, so you can go like that and you can just change the number. See here it is there, and if you just go here and you can just click on 2, and if you try to execute this one, so you will have the first two options. So in this way it will be very easy instead of code if we use the Microsoft SQL server management. You can see only two things are coming up. Is that clear?
Yeah. If I want to look for only a particular record, say from a particular table, say I have students table, I want to look for only a particular record of say student ID number 2. So is that possible?
Can you repeat the question?
We have this say course table, right?
Yeah.
So from course table, I just want to have a look at a particular record, say the record for the Java.
Okay.
So can we retrieve it by just giving the ID?
Yes. So if you want to just look into just JavaScript, for example, so for that we can use the where condition. So select from courses where ID is equals to 4. Or was it okay? It is the course ID, right? So it was course ID. Where course ID is equals to 4. So we have only the JavaScript.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Yeah. Now one more thing you need to keep in mind, like when you want to delete something from the table, for example. So you have this select courses, you're executing it, and you can say delete from courses where, let's say ID or course ID, for example, course ID is equals to 5. So one row is affected, and you can just see, say the fifth one is gone. But the main thing that you need to consider is while you're doing deleting, so while you're deleting a row, you have to specify this condition. If you do not specify the condition and you just click the delete from courses, everything will be going out. You will be deleting everything. So make sure that whenever you are deleting something out, you mention the condition where either the course ID, particular course ID has to be deleted, or the title is equals to SQL or Tableau that you want to delete to, or the number of credits equals to null. So you have to mention that condition while you're deleting something from the table. If you do not mention that condition, the whole table will be going up. Got it?
Is there a way that we can find anything without having the exact name or the value? For say like if I remember only Java instead of JavaScript, can we search using the contains instead of equals to?
Yes, we can do that. So for that we have select from courses where, let's say the title is there. You remember something of the title. The title,
yeah,
like You can just give this one and Java. So what does this mean is select from the courses where title like similar to we do not care what comes in front and we do not care what comes after this Java, but in that entire title this Java name should be there. So if you have anything like that, just pop up on the screen. So that is what this says. You can just execute this one and you have JavaScript coming out.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Any more questions?
I have one another. Why is that like we need the foreign key? Can you explain that? Why we need the foreign key?
There is no a new creating of the foreign key. So I think you know how to we create the primary keys, right? So we have created primary keys for the student, for the courses, and for the teachers. We have created the primary key. So where does this foreign key come up is like in the enrollments part, if you have observed it correctly, we have connected all the other tables primary keys to the enrollments, right? You remember that?
Yeah.
So all those primary keys, when they are connected to the enrollments part, they become the foreign keys for the enrollments table.
Okay.
Because they are coming from another table and they are getting attached to the enrollments table, they're forming the relation. So that is why those three primary keys, when attached to the enrollments table, they'll become the foreign keys for that enrollments table.
So foreign key necessarily has to be a primary key of other table?
Yes.
All right, thanks.
Any more questions, guys?
One question, Venkat sir. How often we use SQL in business analyst?
Not much, I would say. So we would have very less usage of SQL while we are performing the business analysis activity. So it is only required whether you want to have particular data or if you want to analyze something in order to get some business results out of it, or if the client is curious or you are curious about what could be the data of one particular thing. So in those cases, you will be using this SQL commands, the select and the join commands to retrieve that data from the database and try to come up with a solution or analyze something. So it would be not much often that you will be using. So hope everybody understood what we have talked today and what we've discussed regarding all the SQL topics. And these are all the things that these are more than what a business analyst would need. Like we will not be doing much of a database creation, table creation. We will not be inserting the data. So we'll mostly, if we do use SQL for any kind of business analysis purposes, we will only use it for extracting or just reading the data.
Sir, I have a question. In which SQL version or which server, which edition we can practice it?
Anyway, so we have so many development kits that we have. We have for MySQL, we have the one thing that we have used, Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, and you can have the Oracle one. So anything you can use in order to practice SQL. All these provide very good interfaces in order to practice SQL.
Okay.
Yeah, if you go to Google and if you try to search Microsoft SSMS SQL Server Management Studio or Oracle SQL Studio or MySQL, you have that easily downloaded.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And as a business, like a BA, do you have any key takeaways in terms of this SQL knowledge, like handling queries, or maybe during the interviews or with the clients? Do you have any key areas that one has to concentrate?
Yeah, during the interviews, like if your business analysis job description mentions that you need to have an idea of SQL, then most of the time it will be about the queries that you will be needing in order to read the data, like the select queries that we have seen. So if we have the data that is already there, and if you want to read something, then how would you call out that data? So those kind of queries you will be asked in the interviews most of the times if it is mentioned in the JD regarding the SQL. So they'll be asking you to write down the queries in order to retrieve some particular data. So data is present, how will you retrieve that, or how will you make that display on the screen? And that select statements, and as someone has mentioned, what if we need particular columns that we need to understand, that we need to see? Like for the students table, we have first name, last name, date of birth, and enrollment date. So out of all these 4 tables, if you want to view just first name and last name, so what is the select command for that? Or if you want to you use the inner join and describe or display the entire tables, the connection of tables, how are you going to write a query for that? So these joins and the select statements would be most useful for a business analyst, and most of the times those are the things that will be asked in an interview as regarding the SQL part.
Thank you.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, go to W3 Schools or Java at Point websites if you want to learn more about SQL. So they are free, and you can easily understand those resources as well. So I think we don't have any more doubts here. So there has been a very good session. Thank you guys for your listening, and that's it for today's SQL session.
Venkat sir, are we getting any study material for this?
Yeah, so whatever presentation that we have seen in this, we'll be sending that to you, and we're gonna have this video, like whatever the video that we have recorded this. So we'll be posting that on our YouTube channel, and we'll be informing you once we posted it, so that you can rewind it whenever you want to have a look at it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for listening.